All right, everybody. It's James Baldwin. This is my presentation. So my topic is the color barrier in baseball. So a little background on baseball is the first professional baseball league was founded in 1876, and it was originally called the National Association of Baseball Players. In 1920, Judge Landis becomes the first commissioner of MLB baseball. We'll talk about him a little more later. He was did some good and some bad things for baseball, which we'll talk about. The Negro Leagues formed in 1920. We'll talk about those a little more as well. And the color barrier in baseball was broken in 1947, which obviously we'll talk about that later in the presentation as well. That was a big day, big year for baseball. So we're going to talk about these two gentlemen here first, Cap Anson on the left and Commissioner Landis on the right. So two different roles. Cap Anson was a player and a manager later on in his career through baseball. And Commissioner Landis never played. He was just obviously the commissioner of baseball. And so these two were the two main real contributors to keep the African American players out of baseball. And it's a shame, but we'll talk about this. So the two main contributors, obviously, Commissioner Landis, start with him. He did a lot of great things for the game. I mean, one of the first things he did when he became commissioner was he banned 8 players from the Chicago White Stockings and for throwing the 1919 World Series, I believe it was, on purpose because of bets and stuff. And so he got them out of baseball because they were bad for baseball, got them out. But he is also blamed for delaying the integration of baseball. So his main thing was he banned MLB teams from playing teams in the Negro Leagues. The main reason was he feared they would lose, and he thought them losing to a Negro League team just was not a good look for baseball, and he feared they were going to lose, so he didn't want to play. He didn't want them losing to those teams because he just thought it was not good to see an African American team beating a white team. I mean, that's just how it was, and he banned him from playing them. Now, Cap Anson, he did a lot of things. He refused to play games against dark-skinned players all throughout his career, which is just horrible. He refused to play a game on August 10th, 1883, just because the other team's catcher, Moses Fleetwood Walker, was black. I mean, he's the single player that had the most contribution to not integrating baseball. He was the main guy. He did not want to play against African Americans. And one big example is before playing an exhibition game against the Newark Little Giants, where African American George Stovey was slotted to pitch the game and start the game for the Little Giants. Anson objected and refused to play. And him refusing to play got them to take Stovey out of the lineup, and he did not start that game. So later that day, because of his actions, owners voted 6-4 in favor of excluding African American players from professional contracts in the league. I mean, these actions right here cost many great players contracts just because of the color of their skin, which is it's a disgrace. I mean, there were some great African American baseball players at that time, which we'll get to, that really should have played in the major leagues, but couldn't because of some of his actions. And because of it, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, but it is questioned by a lot of people these days just because of his actions, just because he's one of the main reasons why baseball didn't integrate until 1947. I mean, he's one of the main culprits because of it, and a lot of people think he should not be in the Hall of Fame because of that. I mean, yeah, he had a great professional career, one of the first players to get 3,000 hits, but he is the main player that kept the African Americans out of baseball, and I mean, I agree with him. I don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame. So now let's talk about the Negro Leagues. So the Negro Leagues were founded in 1920 under the guidance of Andrew Rube Foster, and it was a predominant African American league, but there were some minority baseball players in there as well. But it was mainly African Americans, with a little mix of Latino players, those kind of players. But so there were 70 teams in the league through its existence. So it lasted about 40 years. And the four most known teams were the Detroit Stars, the Kansas City Monarchs, Homestead Grays, and the Chicago American Giants. So let's talk about the Detroit Stars, the home team here. They were dominant through the 1920s. A lot of good players went through, had a lot of good seasons, but they just weren't able to win a pennant. They just weren't able to crack it and win a World Series in the Negro Leagues. Their best players, known players, Joe Henry, Pete Hill, Bruce Petaway, and Sam Crawford. And they played out of Hamtramck Stadium. Talk about the Kansas City Monarchs now. They are the longest running franchise. They were the longest running franchise in the Negro Leagues, and they won a World Series in the Negro Leagues in '42 and 1924. Some of their key players, Jackie Robinson, who you gotta have in all caps. We'll talk about him later. Satchel Paige, one of the great pitchers, and Ernie Banks, and they played at Muhlbach Stadium. Now let's talk about the Homestead Grays. The Homestead Grays were a great team. They won 11 titles throughout the years, 3 World Series championships in '43, '44, and '48. A lot of great players in this team. I mean, Oscar Charleston, Josh Gibson, Buck Leonard, Smokey Joe Williams. We'll talk about all 4 of them. I mean, they were some of the Negro League's best players to play out of the Negro Leagues. I mean, they were good players, and they played out of Forbes Field. So now we'll talk about the Chicago American Giants. Real dominant for a good 10 years, from 1925 to 35. They won 7 titles, 2 World Series in those years in 26 and 27. Real dominant team. Some notable players: Cristobal Torrente, Tom Williams, Bingo DeMoss, Willie Foster. I mean, they had some good teams, some good players. And they played out of Southside Park in Chicago. So now we're gonna go. I want to talk about really 4 notable Negro League players that never made it and never played a game in the major leagues. Buck Leonard, Smokey Joe Williams, Oscar Charleston, and Josh Gibson. Start with Buck Leonard. He was born September 8th, 1907. Played 17 seasons in the Negro Leagues. Really just a great hitter. I mean, real good hitter. Had 320 batting average, 471 hits, 60 home runs. Was nicknamed the Black Lou Gehrig. I mean, he could just hit the ball. I mean, he's a great hitter. He played for the Homestead Grays and the Brooklyn Royal Giants. He's a great player. Inducted in the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1972. Smokey Joe Williams, another great African American player that never made it. Born April 6, 1885, played 12 seasons in the Negro Leagues. Played for 4 teams, but most notably played for the Grays. Just a real dominant pitcher. I mean, he really dominated the Negro Leagues during his time. Had 84 wins and 111 starts, which is just crazy. Had 104 complete games. I mean, he 20 of his losses or no decisions were complete games, which is just, I mean, you pitch 111 games and have 104 complete games. That's just insane. Had 726 strikeouts through those 111 starts. So, I mean, you do the math. That's a lot of strikeouts. Over about 7 a game, which is crazy. About 7 a game. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, think about the amount of strikeouts. His fastball earned him one of the nicknames Cyclone. And even Ty Cobb, the great Ty Cobb, who was a great hitter during his time, even said that Smokey Joe would be a 30 wins a year guy in the MLB if he was able to play. And in 1999, he was finally inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. But, I mean, this is one pitcher that's really a shame he never got to compete against the best players in the world in the MLB. I mean, it was a shame. Talk about Josh Gibson. Here he born December 21st, 1911. Played 16 years in the Negro Leagues. Played for the Homestead Grays and the Pittsburgh Crawfords. Once again, batted .359, which is incredible. Had 115 home runs, 432 RBIs, and I mean he was just a powerful hitter. I mean, earned himself the nickname the Black Babe Ruth, which, I mean, everyone knows who Babe Ruth is. Everyone knows how dominant he was. I mean, as a pitcher and as a hitter, just could really just hit the ball. He's a great hitter. He was finally inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1972. So now let's talk about this guy right here. This is Jackie Robinson. Now Jackie Robinson is the single most impactful player to ever play in the major leagues. I mean, he is the guy that even if you don't play baseball or follow baseball that well, I mean, you know who Jackie Robinson is. He was just had that big of an impact, and just it was amazing what he did. So, a little background on him. He's born January 31st, 1919. Played varsity football, basketball, baseball, and track in high school. Four-sport athlete. He then attended a junior college where he continued to play all four of those sports as well. Then from there he transferred to UCLA, where he continued to play all sports as a varsity letter winner, which is incredible considering UCLA being a D1 school. I mean, that's crazy to play four sports at a D1 school. It's nuts. In 1942, during World War II, he was drafted to the military. And while in the military, did some things that people don't really like, but I mean, whatever. I mean, he was discharged a few years later. And after he was discharged in 1945, he was offered a contract with the Kansas City Monarchs and the Negro Leagues, obviously. He only played 1 year in the Negro Leagues. He didn't really like the league. I mean, he did well, but he just didn't like what was going on. There was a lot of gambling going on, a lot of stuff that he didn't like. He didn't think that it was just good, clean baseball. There was a lot of under the table, underground things that were going on that he just wasn't a big fan of. So he didn't want to play another year. But while playing Negro Leagues, he did generate a lot of major league interest from a lot of major league teams. One of them being the Boston Red Sox, and a few others. In 1946, he was offered a minor league contract at the Montreal Royals, and so during his time, he was a shortstop to begin the year. He kind of struggled a little bit early in the league, and so the manager moved him to second base, hoping to kind of spark something, and it really sparked some of his confidence, and he began to play much better. I mean, one of the first few games after, he had 4 hits, a couple steals, and this change really kind of pushed him through that year, and really helped him get to the major leagues. So finally, on April 15th, 1947, for the Brooklyn Dodgers, Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier and is the first African American baseball player to play a game in the MLB. The game was at Ebbets Field, and it was against the Boston Braves. This day was a huge day, not only in baseball history, but in civil rights history. I mean, this was huge. Being a black baseball player and being able to end that stretch of where no African American players were in the league, it's huge. I mean, it was a big victory for civil rights and the civil rights movement. It was huge. So during his career, sorry about that. During his playing career, he played 10 years in the major leagues. He faced a lot of racial comments from players, managers, and even owners. I mean, his rookie year was bad. I mean, a lot of owners refused to even play, refused to play him because he was in the lineup. He was thrown at a lot during games. I mean, I'm not positive. I didn't look at the stat, but I'm sure he had to have led the league in most hit by pitches in his rookie year just because people didn't want him there, so they were thrown at him. I mean, I don't know if the movie 42 really kind of shows how bad it was. I mean, some of the stuff people said to him, getting thrown at, I mean, getting stepped on while running the bases or while playing first base, when he played a little first base, people would step on the back of his foot. I mean, it was just